This video is powered by BetUS. Use promo code YouTube150 to get your 150% sign-up bonus. Start playing today with an exclusive offer. Shout out to BetUS for being the proud sponsor of Roundtable Sports.
When the final minutes of the 2024 Seattle Seahawks season wound down and they were able to get that 10th victory of the year against their division rival Rams, who've owned them so hard for so many years recently, it put a big exclamation point on Mike Macdonald's first year as a Seahawks coach as far as being a smashing success. I don't think anyone could have hoped for much better for a guy that is a first-time head coach, for the youngest head coach in the NFL, for a guy that was taking over for a legend. And none of us Seahawks fans, we can't get lost in the forest despite the trees on this one. We always got to put that part in perspective as we are now going to be pivoting on into a very important offseason for your Seattle Seahawks. But in this first year, Mike Macdonald came in as a supposed defensive mastermind, and he took your Seahawks defense, which was a bottom third crew by almost any kind of metric you want to take a look at, and brought him up to a top third crew this year. He really does look like the right guy and the right kind of hire in this era when everybody wants to go for the offensive-minded coach, even if it means they're going for a guy without any head coaching experience who's just barely been an OC. They're plucking him right and left, and the Seahawks took a left turn where everybody else was going right to go with Macdonald because he was supposedly that really young, bright mind, that rare exception in this league of so many offensive gurus that he was the guy on the other end of the scale from the defensive side of the ball. And to get this quick of a turnaround, remembering that he was inheriting the personnel of Coach Carroll's scheme. And Coach Carroll ran a system and a schematics that is on the other complete opposite end of the scale from what Mike Macdonald runs, being that he is in the simplification, Macdonald is in the complication. So he doesn't even have the right players in-house here really to run all of his defense the way he really wants to run it pure. And I say look out NFC West in the future once he actually starts to get that in tow. But this was a really good year from him. Defensively, he came here and got Leonard Williams' best season of his career. I truly do believe, and he's not going to get a lot of acclaim on this. This is kind of an East Coast award anyway. If a West Coast guy is going to win it, it's got to be like an Aaron Donald, where you have to be generational to get the Defensive Player of the Year kind of thing from that side. It's just my own kind of feeling on it, where all the sports writers are out East. The majority are out there. Many of them don't even watch the West Coast games. So it just is going to tend to be an East Coast or a Midwest guy that'll get the award. But I really do believe Leonard Williams deserves it this year. He had an outstanding season for the Seattle Seahawks, 11 sacks, so many tackles for loss, so many pressures. He had the key pick six in the New York Jets game where that interception returned, and his monster play throughout that game where he had 2 sacks. He could have had 3 if this grazing of Aaron Rodgers' helmet wasn't called. And he was a monster on that day against his former team. He really helped to carry you to victory. And one of the reasons I think he should have been Defensive Player of the Year isn't just because of the statistical output. It's because his impact really then directly led to you getting these wins in these games. Unfortunately, his emergence, forced first-round pick, highly touted Byron Murphy to have to kind of sit in the back seat and wait his turn as far as the 3-tech position goes. The team then put him over at nose tackle because things weren't working out so well for the team at the nose tackle position with some of their other options. This meant that Murphy, who had a really successful first year, wasn't in the brightest, best place to go out there and shine and do what he does best. So the future still is very bright for this kid. Didn't have a bad year. If you look at just his stats, you might say that, but it had everything to do with he was taking on double teams time and time again from that nose tackle position. And in him taking on those double teams freed Leonard Williams up to have his single blocks there then when he could go out there and hunt. Derek Hall came forward from 0 sacks to I think 7 or 8 sacks this year. So that was really good to see. He still needs to come forward as a run defender. Boye Mafe had a really good overall year. We're kind of hoping he can maybe start to take the next step in his development from last season off 9 sacks. Sacks went down a little bit. Run defense was still really solid throughout the course of this whole season. We kind of just hoped that he could maybe be more of a 12, 13 sack guy along with that really good run defense. Not to be one of those upper crust defenders in the league, but just looking to see if maybe that next step was there. I don't know if it will be there, but he is still a very, very, very solid player. Unfortunately for Mike Macdonald, his defense early in the season was really suffering. And it was suffering because of the fact that mainly your 2 inside linebackers, let me just try to put this as kindly as I can, sucked. They just did. You had signed 2 guys on 1-year deals this offseason in Jerome Baker and Tyrell Dodson to be those guys who could come in there and fill in until you could kind of get, I think, better options in the future. Tyrese Knight, your 4th rounder, could have some time to develop. Those guys came in there and they just were lost in the sauce. They were not willing to take on blocks. They weren't particularly good as tacklers. They had cow-like instincts at times. And you come back and go, okay, this is going to work. And fortunately enough, Macdonald showed part of why he is a bright mind is not just because of the X's and O's and what he dials up on a play calling standpoint game to game, but also by how he's going to build this defense. And he recognized that these 2 inside linebackers aren't working. The team slid Tyrese Knight to the will linebacker role. They went out there and made a really aggressive trade for Ernest Jones. He came in and you had now two real pure fits for McDonald's defense, and the defense was really able to take off by and large from there. But both of those two guys were wonderful additions. Tyrese Knight was by far, I think, the best draft pick as far as the production from him this year. Not saying Murphy didn't do well. Again, he did, but Knight really shined this season, and a guy with looks like he's got some real true upside to him from the will linebacker role. The will is kind of one of those places in the NFL that is a little bit of a forgotten man, because there's not the stats to back up your really high level of play when you're doing it, but there's a lot required from the position. You got to run, you got to tackle, you got to be able to cover out in space. You got to be able to tackle in space one-on-one, sometimes with running backs running at you with a little bit of build-up speed. And he showed that good all-around skill set on display. Also had a sack and a half. Really capable blitzer from the inside, which is, of course, going to be very important to Mike McDonald's scheme. But Tyrese Knight got it done this year. Great year from him, from the UTEP kid. He also is a guy that might be a future Mike if they can't get Ernest Jones signed to a contract extension this offseason. We'll see, but really good year for him. Kobe Bryant was drafted in the 4th round 2 years ago as an outside corner. This man won the Walter Thorpe Award from best college corner that year, even though despite the fact Sauce Gardner was the guy opposite him. That's how well he was thought of coming out of college, 2-time All-ACC corner. And the Seahawks first thing moved him out outside corner to slot. And in that first year, he showed off this peanut Tillman punch where I think he had 5-6 fumbles caused, a real nose for the ball. He had a couple of interceptions that year that were also called back. And then his guys had to kind of wait his turn now, because once you got Witherspoon slid into the slot. That kind of bumped him out. The team then just kind of went, well, we don't have anywhere to put him. Let's see. Let's throw him out there at safety and see what he can do. And so he's kind of had to now pick up safety, his 3rd position here in the pros. And you slid him out there after you had some injuries this year with Rayshon Jenkins, who was pretty underwhelming as a free agent signing, kind of like Baker and Dodson, kind of on a short-term deal, just wasn't particularly good. And he really played well. Him and Julian Love were a hell of a tandem. Julian Love played like a top 10 safety. He played like a top 20 safety from the position. He's got another year on his contractual on the books before he's going to be a free agent. And Seahawks might even be looking to target him as maybe an option there in the long term, because you like with him and Love both, they've got corner backgrounds, they've got strong safety backgrounds, they can both do free safety stuff, so they give you that full capable skill set that Mike wants to have in his safeties in those cover 2 shell looks, so that he can run any kind of package on either side of the field between his 2 safeties. They can do all of that stuff.
Huge shout out to BetUS for sponsoring today's show. If you guys go to BetUS, you guys can use a 150% bonus on your first deposit to get a 150% bonus, 125% on your next 2. That's up to $2,000. The Super Bowl is here. Chiefs, Eagles, and the early odds is in favor of the Kansas City Chiefs with 1-point favorites, with the money line at -127, and the over-under is at 49. If you want to check out BetUS, you can already bet on the Super Bowl. They have a lot of fun prop bets. You can even bet on the coin toss if you wanted to. Are the Chiefs going to win the coin toss, or are the Eagles going to win the coin toss? And if you stay tuned to BetUS, they always come out with the best Super Bowl prop bets on the entire planet. So definitely go check out BetUS at betus.com.pa and using the promo code YouTube150 when you sign up today.
Really impressive to see Kobe Bryant, who's not had an easy road to get where he's gone. It hasn't been downhill and he just gets go. It's you're moving here and then you're moving here. And I mean, you can imagine trying to learn 2 different separate positions at the NFL and then getting good at that last one you landed on in pretty fast fashion as well. So the defense really did come along. Rick Willen was a little bit disappointing. You look for him to really be able to take off in this defense. He was going to travel with wide receivers, more man coverage concepts. I think he had his worst year in coverage this year. He gave up more touchdowns than ever before. He had a lot of just sort of brain fart moments on the football field where it didn't seem like he was thinking. And though his tackling came a little bit forward, it didn't come far forward this season. It was kind of a marginal step at best. This is a guy that I would not be shocked necessarily this offseason if the Seahawks might look to deal him, as I don't know if he's really a pure fit here for Mike McDonald's defense. Not a lot of other notable guys along that defense to speak of. When you go over to the offensive side of the ball, it's much more of a mixed bag in there. Charles Cross really came forward. He looks like a top 10 left tackle as it stands right now, and he might even have a little bit more upside to him as we go forward. That was great to see for an offensive line that once again, for another season, was in complete disarray this year. You were moving parts in and out, and your option plans and your insurance plans and your back-end draft picks. None of it just was really working, with the exception of you finally got Abraham Lucas back onto this team about midway through the year. And to understand Abraham Lucas's importance here, when I was making my predictions prior to this season, I saw the Seahawks as a 10-win season. But I did say that if they get Abraham Lucas more than half of the games this year, they would get to 11 games. Now, they only got to 10 wins, but you had just a little bit less than half of the season from Abraham Lucas as far as games played. I think he played like 6-7 games on the season. And when he was out there, it was a real big difference to any other guys you've tried out there the past couple of years. He is a big boon to this offensive line. And it's not even out there being as a dominator or he's just taking souls. It's just being steady. It's just not being a revolving door at the position or an open door at the position. The interior of the offensive line was a mess. We had centers that couldn't snap the ball. We had a center that retired mid-season for just a lack of love for the game all of a sudden. It was just, again, complete mess. The Seattle Seahawks this offseason, have to make priority number one addressing this offensive line, and specifically the interior of the offensive line. Our general manager, John Schneider, has tended to go pretty light at this position in years past. He's got to absolutely hammer this, double down on it, and find a way to fix this, because this was a big part of what sunk your offense this season. Yes, Grubb, the offensive coordinator, you tried to go out there and get, and the big swing in that did not work. That is very much true, but they're both true at the same time. Grubb didn't work as a hiring, and the offensive line also didn't work as in the way that you constructed it. And you can understand why it didn't work, because not only did you not put enough draft real capital into this group per se there, but then you, far beyond that, didn't put enough investments dollar-wise into this group. It's no surprise to see him perform this well when you spend as less money as anybody in the NFL into the position. You pay what you get. You know, you're going to pay dollar store prices. You can't be surprised when you get dollar store type performances from your offensive line. Geno Smith struggled this year a little bit behind that line at times, but I don't think it was always his fault because he had some really highlight moments as well. PFF has him marked as a top 9 quarterback in this sport in his performance this season, and I think that fits to what you saw from him on the eye test. It wasn't perfect, but one of my big points that I've made very much on this channel over and over again is that you put any quarterback into this situation where so much is failing around him. And I think he's got 3 of his pass catchers were top 25 in drops, a back-end pass-protecting offensive line, no commitment to the running game, no efficiency or effectiveness in running the ball when you would try to run it, a very bland offensive system that was easy to predict from a defensive model standpoint. He's not set up for success with that, and yet he does find success within that. And that's one of the reasons I've been a big benefactor of Geno Smith is because, again, this year, even almost more of an extreme basis for a third straight year, this was on display. And just one of those other reasons why, from a Seahawks organization standpoint, that you got to invest in this offensive line. Not just because it's been bad, not just because it's sunk this team time and time again, but then in the investment of it, it will raise up and lift all of the boats. Lifting this particular tide will raise all of these boats with it, being your running backs, your receivers, and yes, your quarterback, be it Geno Smith or whoever the team might look to go to in the future. But this is a lesson to be learned by the organization, and a hard one at that, is it's been about 10 years since our general manager has been able to build a competent offensive line. And speaking of 10 years, this is the part that's now the next thing that we're going to be pushing forward to from a Seahawks standpoint, a Seahawks fan standpoint, and the front office standpoint, and that is, what next? What's the next step here for this team? Because you win 10 games, 9 wins, now you're back to 10 wins this year. And on the surface of it, it'd be easy to look at that and go, okay, well, just steady as she goes, maintain course, captain. Certainly you'll get to 11 or 12 wins next year. But I think from many Seahawks fans' perspective, they go, it's just not going to just naturally happen. This team needs to take more of a certain direction on where they really want to go this year, rather than just kind of letting things naturally kind of progress and hoping something good's going to come from that. That's what this team has done for 10 years. And they've done that for 10 years at the same time of every single year, both head coach and general manager telling you, we're contending this year. We're contending this year. We're contending this year. And so I think what many Hawk fans are wanting to see now is we've got one playoff win since 2017. And that one playoff win that we had in 2017 was against an Eagles team that had no Carson Wentz, 40-year-old Josh McCown, who was dragging around one hamstring through that whole game. And he almost beat you at that team for the Seahawks. You had to make some plays down the line just to win that game. So it's not exactly like we've been in this contending state. And this isn't about just trying to kind of slide your way in the back door of the playoffs, as we kind of were having to try to do again this year. And understandably so, with the first year of head coach Mike McDonald, we're trying to get to a contender. And we seem far away from that. And so it's got to be more about what's the certain step to take. And it comes down to that fork in the road for me. If you want to be a contender, you want to be elite, you're going to have to make some real hard, aggressive moves to make that happen. You're going to have to spend some big time money on the offensive line in a way that you've been unwilling to do for well over a decade, which I'm fine if they want to take that trek. They seem to be a little bit close. Those kind of moves could push you up over the top. And you have to make a couple other moves probably in addition to that. You're going to have to rob a little bit from 2026 and 27 cap to make that happen. The other road is to take the step back is to look at big-time contracts that you might have to dole out this offseason to DK Metcalf and Geno Smith. And rather than doling out those contracts, rather than squeezing players into the books here with a salary cap structure that's very limited this offseason, as the Hawks, according to Over the Cap, coming into this offseason are about $20 million over the cap in functional cap space. When you build into what they got to spend on draft picks and the $6.5-7 million reserve fund that you have to have during the year. So they've got to make some room as it is anyway. Say nothing of signing now with Geno and DK, the two biggest contracts that you would have on your books as we go into next year. They've got to be sure about what they want to do here. If you sign those deals, you're going elite, you're driving hard in that way, it's maximum aggressive time. Hit the NOS button. But if you're not doing that, then I think there's an argument to be made of taking the one step back, of not necessarily locking and loading into the fact that 2025 has got to be the year that we go for it. It doesn't have to be. It can be. But I think the Hawks and the fan base would be understandable if John came back to them and said, look, we looked at this team and said there's much more work to be done. We've spent 10 years of misidentifying ourselves every season and saying we are ready to contend, going out, and then we're not ready to contend. We need to start fixing where we've been problematic. We need to correct where we've been wrong. We got to kind of cover up the Achilles heel as much as we can. This has been your kind of Achilles heel as much as anything else, because it's not just about you saying you're a contender. It's about you saying you're a contender and then making decisions down the line that inform you that you're a contender. This last offseason, John, we're still going for it. We're contending. Well, then this drives you to start to make trades for guys like Trevis Gibson and Roy Robertson Harris and Ernest Jones, and then sign the contract extension to a Leonard Williams, as they did, despite the fact that now does put a bit of an impediment in front of a guy like Byron Murphy that you just brought in. Now, you had to sign the Williams deal before you got Murphy, so they didn't know they were going to have him on that. But again, that's more of a move for the now. And there's so many of these moves over the past 10 years being real hyper-aggressive trades and desperate trades at that, where you're always robbing for tomorrow, for today, because you think today you really have a chance. And they didn't really have a chance this year today. You shouldn't have been making so many of these moves in that way as far as trades, as far as restructuring some of the salary cap situation you had where you based to bonus Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Those were moves to maximize more of the cap for 2024, not to help the cap situation for 25 or 26 in a year where you were onboarding a new head coach. So I think there's a good argument to be made that this team should probably try to maybe take a bit of a step back this offseason in that way, to build this right, to build it appropriately, to build it up good, to get into 26 and 27. Well, you'll have as much cap space as anybody in the NFL if you take this route. But this is the interesting decision now for John Schneider and Mike McDonald about what they want to do next. And I don't envy them. It's not an easy decision. Certainly the Seahawks fan base is getting impatient. This is the first year in a while that I can remember seeing so many fans take over the stadium. And I heard that we had, I think, a back third viewership as far as our games across the sport right now. There's not as many eyeballs on this team right now. And you could make that argument again. There's a need for a little bit more of a shakeup here rather than just sort of business as usual and just hope it progresses. It'll be interesting to see which direction they go this offseason, but it was a good year for your Seahawks in 2024. You made progress. You got development from those young players, especially that young class off the Russell Wilson trade from a couple of years ago. Many of them are coming forward. You feel good about most all of those guys. Now it's just about deciding how hard you want to drive this down into next year, because the team is definitely on the right path. And most importantly, they got the right coach in Mike McDonald. He is that defensive mastermind. He is that guy we were hoping was going to be able to brought in here. I know there's not a lot of these guys in this sport that you can look at in this way, but I do believe he is going to be one of them. And it's going to be so fun to watch into the future, the battles between him and Shanahan and McVay. As we saw this year, even some of the chess matches, kind of robbed of it in that last game against the Rams because they were kind of checked out. But I think there's going to be some real fun battles between these teams as we move into the future. My name is Brandon Kane. This is the Roundtable. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. We'll be back soon, but until next time, go Hawks.
This video is powered by BetUS. Use promo code YouTube150 to get your 150% sign-up bonus. Start playing today with an exclusive offer. Shout out to BetUS for being the proud sponsor of Roundtable Sports.